Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
Tuesday, March 5th, we'll call this meeting to order. Our first item up is City Council open discussion. Is there any City Council open discussion? Councilor Sale, thank you for
Madam Chair,
raising your hand.
Madam Chair, I'm very happy to report that over the weekend, I was able to see robins in my backyard. That to me is a sign that spring is coming, so I just wanted to say that's some good news, that we've got some good things going on. Secondly, just a brief thing on the Events Campus Study Group that I'm a part of. We've had our first meeting, was introductions and a tour of the buildings, and the reports that we got was something that's been presented to the council last spring, the Public Assembly Facility Strategic Planning Report, that we all had to go home and do our homework. So more meetings are coming, discussions are gonna go about how to hold these meetings and where to have them and what to do with the public input and what to reach out. So that's all I have to report on that.
Thank you for the update. Any other City Council open discussion? Councilor Starr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. On Saturday, I was honored to be one of the celebrity timers, and I stressed and lost actually some sleep about it at the Midco Aquatic Center. It's the first time that the State A swim meet was held here in Sioux Falls over 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. An incredible event with some really awesome young people who set some records, were able to use the facility. And what was kind of interesting is it's the first time that this meet has been able to use 2 pools at the same time. So it really made a difference in their scheduling for to be able to run 2 distance races at the same time. So when they get to their longer events like the mile swim, instead of having 10 swimmers go and then have the next 10, they're able to run 20 at a time, and it really moves their events along, especially with the distance races and things. But I think what was, other than getting past parking and getting everybody in and out of the parking lot and in the neighborhood, I think everything went really well, and it was a boon to our facility as well as a boon to our community to be able to host the swim meet right here in our community.
Thank you for the update. Any other? Councilor Brecky.
I'd like to share with you an exciting opportunity that I've agreed to participate in. I'm just going to explain it to you here. The National League of Cities has recently partnered with the National Veterans Intermediary, also known as NVI, to establish and help strengthen a collaborative community effort to support transitioning military personnel, veterans, National Guard, reservists, their families, and caregivers. NVI is working with a network of more than 90 communities across 38 states to develop and disseminate promising practices. In Sioux Falls, they are working with currently the Community Action for Veterans Group, CAVU, which is headed up by Jill Baker. On Saturday, March 9th, from 12:30 to 4:30, NLC, partnering with NVI, are having an event where we will hear from, myself and Jill Baker will hear from communities on the leading edge of building collaborations in this area. Jill Baker and I will be attending that event. We will be having conversations on what is happening in Sioux Falls and how to strengthen our efforts in Sioux Falls in coordination with other stakeholders. NLC and NBI believe that in order to effectively and efficiently serve veterans and their families, local elected officials must be joined by state and federal partners as well as community stakeholders. This event is designed to elevate and accelerate local efforts to achieve that goal. I have heard Governor Noem speak on 2 occasions recently, and she has indicated that one of her goals is to help with work on the suicide rate of our national veterans organization. So it's, I think, exciting opportunity for the city to be involved in an effort such as this. And so I've accepted the offer to participate in this, and I'm pleased to be able to devote my time and energies to it. I will be attending this special meeting on Saturday in Washington, D.C. this week, as well as the National League of Cities Congress of Cities. The entire costs of this trip will be covered by the National League of Cities, and I will be responding back to the council I will be responding back to the council with my experiences, and as I work through this and become more involved in it, I will give you a play-by-play. So I look forward to both the special meeting, and attendance at the Congress of Cities.
Thank you for the update. It's very exciting, and we appreciate you going. What a great opportunity. Any other, Councilor Staley?
Last Wednesday, we had a working session, which I was so excited to do, and TJ Nelson from the Mayor's Office and Sean Pritchard of our Finance Department attended and took notes, and I appreciated that. And also taking notes was our budget analyst, Dave Bixler. Dave has comprised a list of the topics that we brought to the meeting, and one of the things that was brought up was incorporating the citizen survey that we do every year. However, our citizen survey, and Dave, if you would just step up here for a minute, we talked about bringing that into the list of priorities. Unfortunately, the citizen survey is not going to be done until after the city has indicated the budget has been somewhat formalized. Am I correct with that?
Yes. David Bixler, Budget Analyst, City Council. The final results for the citizen survey won't be in until April 16th.
And when did Mr. Pritchard indicate that?
March 22nd
Okay.
is a key date for that.
And the purpose, thank you, the purpose, and thank you for taking these good summary notes, as you did. So I know that two of our council members weren't able to be here last week, so I'm asking, I would like to have another budget meeting. I know Councilor Brecky had wanted to, but I would like to come together again, and my hope was that we would come up, we could take these survey results from the last year as the priority needs of our citizens, the things that we've been hearing, the things we have on our hearts, and that we could bring those together and come up with a list of things to show to the mayor's office that these are our top priorities within the council. So I'm going to be asking that we could try to schedule another budget meeting before that, well, as soon as possible, actually. And maybe, Mr. Pritchard, would you mind coming up for a second? Could you give us a deadline when, if we had something that we'd like you to consider with the departments, what would be a deadline for that?
Well, the departments are submitting they're putting their proposals together currently. Their new proposals are due back to us, as I said, on March 22nd, and then we'll be reviewing that and putting together the budget over the next several months after that.
So getting some, if we wanted to just be at the front end of this, the end of March would be a good time to come forth. Okay, thank you.
Any other open discussion? I have one thing that I wanted to just briefly update the council on and let you know about an amazing opportunity that we have. I ran into the warden for our South Dakota Penitentiary, State Penitentiary, this last week, Darren Young. We also attend church together, and I've gotten to know him quite well over the years. Through our conversations, we were talking about a community work program and how really the city can partner better with the South Dakota Penitentiary. This is already in the works. It has been a priority of this administration already. They're having those conversations, but some of the areas that you could see some collaboration and some cooperation with using the DOC inmates is anything from the sign department, striping parking lots, and other certification. Clearly, research shows the recidivism rate, self-worth, possible restitution paid and time off your sentence is a great benefit for these people that are coming back into our community, to giving them the tools that they need. It's an amazing opportunity. I didn't know if he would take me up on the offer. I asked if we could tour the penitentiary, and he said yes. And so if anyone is interested, I'll be working with our staff to get 1 or 2 dates for us to be able to go through the penitentiary, ask him questions, meet with his staff, and also him communicate with us everything that's already in the works that's being done currently to creating that community work program through many different departments through the city. And so I share that with you because it's exciting that it's being done and something that I'm extremely supportive of. When I lived in Pierre, the women's penitentiary, oftentimes we would see them cleaning the office buildings and doing other things throughout the community, and it's a great asset to the workforce in some of these other cities and the recidivism. Again, one thing I didn't realize is that many nonprofits can also utilize the DOC and using that workforce. And oftentimes we don't look at the inmates as really workforce, but it truly is an opportunity for us to reshape these minds when they come out of making some poor decisions. So just wanted to share that with you and let you know that an email will be coming about taking a tour of that. Darren has been extremely helpful. I've also invited and been talking with Erica Beck, making sure that there's folks from the administration that are there as well and showing through the process of what they're doing. So, Councilor Staley, did you have a question?
Well, no, just a follow-up, because I have been speaking about that for some time. I met with the mayor myself last winter. I talked with our mayor, or excuse me, the warden, and then I had that conversation with our mayor during his campaign and several times after he was elected. And I just brought this up at our budget meeting last week, that indeed, we can get this workforce for $1.25 an hour. I have already stated, and I'm glad you're reinstating that, Councilor Erickson, that it's going to be a great opportunity for all of us. But the thing I was really hoping for, and that I wanted to meet with the mayor and Erica Beck with, was to talk about Project Trim, that we can use that workforce, because these guys can handle a chainsaw. They can be out there and helping to alleviate the costs that we put on citizens to trim their trees in the boulevard. I think that's a cost and a service that we should be providing as a city. We're told that it's an expense issue, so this would be something I'm hoping that we can put that energy, in addition to stripes and painting signs, that we can have them helping with the issue of the arbor care in our city. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm glad you agree. It will be a great opportunity for all of us. Councilor Neitzer.
That could be a possibility, but I would want somebody that was trained. You have arborists that trim trees. You don't just hack it with a chainsaw unless you want to kill it.
Correct.
So.
Yeah, there is, I talked about this exact program, and there's a rigorous certification program to go through for many of the different areas to ensure that it's just not saying, here, take a chainsaw and go trim trees. It certainly wants, everyone wants it to be done so the community is safe, so assets are protected in the community, and really that we're focusing on recidivism as well as the workforce in our community.
Well,
so,
and let me just say that already a citizen can trim their own trees. So we're allowing anyone to go out and trim their trees if they'd like to on the boulevard. So having, under supervision, having this workforce, and the warden assured me that they are certified to operate a chainsaw, that, I mean, he was excited to maybe pursue this.
Great. I think another area, like I said, when I mentioned the nonprofits, that getting the word out to many of these nonprofits in our community, making sure that they realize that this is an opportunity for them as well, and not just the city. Sure, it saves the city resources, but that in turn is the money of the citizens. And so if we can kind of partner together in multiple ways, I think it's a huge positive for our community and really underutilized over the last several years. And so I'm grateful and thankful that the administration is going full steam ahead with this and looking at those ways that we can partner. Stay tuned, look at your emails. I will send out a couple different options for when we can take a tour in the most safe way possible. I did tour the women's prison, and it was done very well, and we were all safe. So any other open discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to our first item up, which is the 2018 financial results. Excuse me. Welcome, Director Sean.
Sean Pritchett, Finance Director. Pleased to be here to present our 2018 financial results for the year. I will note that this is pre-audited information. We are wrapping up the audit presently. That should be done toward the end of this month. It'll be presented to the audit committee at the end of April. But most of there won't be any material changes that we're aware of in regard to the financial information being presented, so it should be a fair representation of the status of our city as of December 31st, 2018. So we had a good year. We had a strong economic and financial performance in 2018, allowing us to end in a solid financial position as we go into 2019 as well. So, there we go. So in terms of the outline of what we'll cover today, first we will talk just very briefly on a snapshot of the economy. We focus more on this on the monthly reports that we give, and we want to give due time to speaking more primarily about the financial results and specifically the general fund, which we will spend the most time on. We will review the capital program, the enterprise activities, speak briefly in regard to where we sit in our debt, and then kind of a forward outlook as well. So in terms of an economic snapshot, no surprise, we consistently have low unemployment relative to the rest of the nation, and we're hovering in that 2 to 3% range as we have in the past. Certainly this has increased our awareness of workforce development issues and refocused many efforts for ourselves and for others in the communities to support those economic and workforce development efforts here and supporting our local businesses and economy. And also has been publicly aware on several occasions as well that we set a record in terms of the building permits in the community. We had a $47 million increase in our building permit activity. Several large projects went to construction this year, and certainly this helps on a financial piece as well because of our property taxes being an important part of our revenue sources, and these will represent future property tax items for us. One of the most important things that we're going to look at and we continue to look at is our sales tax collections, predominantly because if we look at the general fund, this represents about 39% of our total revenues for the city. And it does have some variability to it, so we have to track it closely to see how we're performing relative to what we had planned for or forecasted in our budget. While 2017 had seen a slowdown, a significant slowdown in the sales tax activity, we did see this pick up again in 2018, as we've talked about throughout the year. We did end the year with a 4.5% 12-month rolling increase over 2017, which benefited us greatly because we had projected a 1% increase in 2018 being conservative coming out of 2017. So that resulted in about $2.6 million in additional revenues for our general fund, but it also resulted in another $2.6 million of second penny revenue that's available for capital projects. This has continued to increase into January. We are not doing a January report here, but we'll see the rolling average actually went up to 4.8% in January. So we continue to see positive momentum in regard to that. We also talk a lot about the entertainment tax collections because this represents more of our discretionary income as a community and things that we're spending for lodging, beverages, prepared foods, and ticketed events. And we did see an uptick in this similar to the sales tax over the past year where we saw an increase to 4.8% on a rolling basis at the end of 2018. So we had strong performance in both of those, and as we roll into our financial results, you'll see that that performance helped us from a financial statement perspective and a revenue perspective as a community also. So the first thing we focus on is the general fund, and we focus quite a bit on this because this represents the primary operating fund for the city, covering things that we recognize as our typical government services, police and fire services, library operations, engineering, parks, snow removal and such, health and libraries, and general governmental services. So on the revenue side, if you can see, we budgeted for $157.7 million, and we came in at $161.6 million. So we are at about 102% of what we projected, which is very positive, and brought in about $3.9 million more overall than we had originally anticipated. At the same time, on the expenditure side, we came in about $5 million under budget, so we had expected that we would be utilizing reserves and we would have expenditures over revenues of about $4 million when we budgeted and you approved a budget for this year. But this year we actually generated revenues in excess of expenditures to $5 million, so that will be added to our general fund available balance and help support future operations of the community over time. Being at about $5 million of expenditures under budget, that's about 97% of our budget, and that's very typical. If you looked at the last 5 years, we typically are about, on average, about 97% spent on our budget. On the revenue side, if you looked at the last 5 years, we're about 100% in terms of being able to forecast our revenues. So for the staff of the finance department has done an outstanding job of really trying to track these. And even though we vary a little bit from year to year, overall, we've done a very good job of kind of being able to manage what those inflows of revenues are going to be for our community. If you look at a little bit of our history over the last 5 years, so this is the second year in a row where we've actually achieved revenues in excess of expenditures, even though in both years we hadn't budgeted that being the case. In 2015 and 2016, we had expenditures in excess of revenue, so we did dip into our reserves for a couple of those years. Things that were occurring were some one-time items in those years, such as opening a new fire station in 11, which occurred in 2015, the Midco Aquatic Center in 2016. These are not just capital expenses to us, but they also represented significant jumps in operating expenses for us. So when we try to forecast out going into future years and we think about where our revenues and expenditure expectations should be, we are trying to smooth out that curve. And so in certain years, we may run into our reserves, and then we try to add to our reserves in other years in preparation for when we have that next fire station open, which is currently programmed in for 2021. So we're already trying to think ahead several years in advance and being prepared from that on an expenditure side. As we look specifically at our revenues, as I said, we get a predominant portion of our revenues in the general fund from property and sales taxes. So that represents more than 75% of all the revenues that we have. So we are extremely reliant upon those two sources. Property taxes tend to be a very stable source for us. They have grown over time, and we've done a good job of being able to project where they come in at. And in fact, we came in basically at 100% of what we had projected for this year. On the sales tax side, as I noted, we are about $2.6 million ahead of where we had anticipated in the budget. So we saw more growth, which is positive in this area than we had originally anticipated. In terms of other areas to highlight, for the more detailed summary that you were provided as part of preparation for this meeting, and in your monthly report, you will see like our bank franchise taxes came in about $844,000 more than we had anticipated. That's a very variable expense. We try to be conservative on it because it is reliant upon bank profitability in terms of how much we'll collect from that, and we don't want to be caught short with that. So, but we're on the positive side for that this year. The other piece of it is we came in about $1.1 million ahead on investment income, or interest income, and so we're starting to see with the interest rates going up, we are actually starting to accumulate some revenues as a result of some of the reserves and pooled cash that we have as a city, and taking advantage of that as well. Just a quick slide on the history of our growth on the property tax side. So it's been very consistent over time. On average, the last 5 years, we've seen about 4.2% increases in property taxes over time. Last year, we had 4.6, 4.7 the previous year. So we're a little bit ahead of our 5-year average, but very consistent with that growth over time. On the sales tax side, as I said, we saw a marketed improvement in 2018 versus 2017, where we did see a significant slowdown there. We're still not back to where we were necessarily back in 2014 or 2015, but certainly we're more on pace with the kind of growth that we would like to see to support the services of the city. If we look at a little bit more detail on the expenditure side, how was the $5 million saved? I would say a predominant portion of this is related to wages and personnel costs. A lot of this might have been open positions that were held open for a while for a variety of reasons if they were hard to fill positions. I give you the example. So under general government, you can see that we saved $1.1 million. $400,000 of that was in the finance department on a personnel cost side. Certain positions were open for a period of time. And so that's a consistent theme as you look throughout the departments. The same thing with Parks and Recreation, about $635,000 or so of the $800,000 saved on that part was related to personnel costs. About half of that was related to part-time employees. So if pools are closing because it's cold out, we're not paying part-time employees. We do budget for that, but we do see some cost savings there as well. On the health side, similarly, we had some professional positions that are hard to fill and went unfilled. That one actually impacts us both on a revenue and expense side because we're not generating revenue as a result of those unfilled positions on that side. And then economic development at $1 million saved there. That's not just related to what used to be the economic development department for the city, which was restructured and eliminated, but a lot of the lodging and CVB bid stuff is incorporated into that particular category, so that flow through. We came in under budget in terms of the receipts of those revenues that are passed through to the CVB, and so we also see a wash on the expense side, so most of that is related to that piece. So based on the fact that we did have revenues in excess of expenditures of about $5 million, we have added to our available balance for the city, so we will end the year at about $52 million of available balance in the general fund. This represents 32.2% of our budget. And that's an important figure because we have a 25% policy target that we try to meet that was set by the council several years ago in order to make sure that we maintain our fiduciary responsibility. And so we had that target to maintain that in reserves. You can see in 2015, 2016, when we had expenditures that were in excess of revenue, we were drawing that down a little bit. Now we've rebuilt that again in 2017. You're seeing that to increase again in 2018. But we also had to be careful that that's very variable on a month-to-month basis. And as for our budget, you can already see it kind of drops for our January budget because we have a larger budget that we're now weighing against. But on the positive side of that, the one thing I would like to say is that, you know, we've been able to build that fund over time and over the last couple of years help rebuild and shore up those reserves, which helps us as we look forward economically into the future. The other piece that I failed to talk about a little bit too is, and I think it's important to note, you know, if we looked at 2017 versus 2018, our expenditures went up by about 3.3% as a community for government in the general fund. Our revenues went up 3.8%. So we actually saw more growth in revenue than we did in expenses, which is something positive we would want to see. But if we also look at the fact that we had 2% inflation during 2018 approximately, and we grew as a community by 2% as well. And if you combine that and you think, okay, we have 4%, it's reasonable for us to see a 3.8% increase in revenues. And it's even more reasonable for us to have a government that only grew at 3.3% relative to the growth of our community and the inflation that we saw during that time period. So I think those are positive things that I wanted to make sure that we also passed along. On the capital side, so there was about a $121.5 million investment into capital investments in this community in 2018. And as is typical, a majority of that, or 40%, is related to highways and streets, where there was an almost $50 million investment into capital items. Utilities represented the second portion, so this would be your water and wastewater and so forth, some of those investments, and so that represented about another $30 million. Culture and recreation had about a $13 million investment into the city, and that would include both parks and recreation, but it also includes our entertainment venues also. And then under the other category, about $26 million, and this category was actually a little bit higher for this year than we would typically expect, mostly because we did have the city center, so that was $11 million of that piece that occurred this year. We also had a $5 million investment in parking with the parking lot project. So those pieces were more unusual for this particular year, but we also invested $5 million in new equipment for fleet and almost $3 million in equipment for transit. Some of the major projects that are worth highlighting, of course, we talked about the City Administrative Center, but we also had the investment into the brown bear exhibit at the Great Plains Zoo. We had several major road projects, as you're familiar with the reconstruction and expansion of TLS Road, but we also had the reconstruction of Minnesota Avenue from 22nd to 33rd Street, and the reconstruction of that 26th Street interchange or intersection. Would point out that we overlaid 186 blocks, had 35 blocks of concrete rehab, 50 blocks of core neighborhood reconstruction, 397 blocks of micro-servicing for various locations throughout the city. So that just gives you a little bit of a highlight of some of those capital improvements. As far as where our available balance is for the sales tax fund, so every year when we get done with the year, we kind of look at where we were at on our CIP side and look at what additional revenues we might have had that is available to allocate for some additional projects. In 2018, we ended with an available balance of about $4.6 million. This is higher than what it's been in more recent years. 2.6 million of this is related to the sales tax, the additional revenue that we generated as a result of that. 1.2 million is actually a result of having paid down some debt, and in doing so, we actually have to reserve. We have to set aside some funds in reserve and a trust for that debt, and by paying down some debt, we were actually able to release some of those reserves and add it. So that kind of difference between 2017, 2018, that 1.2 million is actually a result of having paid down debt and making that available for other capital projects. We also had about $500,000 of interest income and some savings on some projects that had been completed but came in under budget and released their portion of what had been allocated for them. Finally, just a couple other items. Enterprise funds. These, of course, are self-supporting funds, so these are going to both include capital as well as operating items. The thing I would point out here is that all of the funds had positive cash flow in 2018. The other thing that I would point out is almost all of the funds had an increase in their available cash as a result of 2018. And of course, each of those funds takes a look at those enterprises and takes a look at what their cash balance is, projects out and forecasts, and tries to determine what they need to be investing in. So we're continuing to reinvest in infrastructure improvements in the community and not having to borrow to do so. The one that did have a reduction in cash was parking, and that is actually a result of the commitment and the restriction of cash that was going toward the parking lot project. So that was intentional. Last thing I'm going to talk about is outstanding debt. And we'll just highlight this briefly, and in one of the next few monthly presentations that we do, we're going to go more into depth on the debt side, especially as we get more information about what some of our comparable communities have for their debt, and we can share that information with you and kind of compare Sioux Falls to how we're performing relative to other communities. But the one thing that I want to point out, so we did have an increase of about $6 million in how much outstanding debt we have as a community. But we also drew some advances on some debt for different projects that occurred. So we actually, through our regular payments, paid down debt by about $25 million in 2018. We also refunded and paid down the loan that I spoke about, the 2007 bond. So when that was done, we actually dropped that down by another $5 million. So we actually applied about $30 million to principal reduction in 2018. But you will see, so under the governmental funds, you'll see that we were down about $7 million within the governmental side. We did draw about $7 million on the storm drainage side for some projects that were going on, so there was some additional debt there. On the enterprise side, we did draw down, I think, approximately $11 million that was pulled down for water reclamation as they continue on their projects. And then there was the $18.5 million that was borrowed for the parking lot project. So while we paid down debt to the tune of about $30 million, we did borrow some additional funds of about $36 million. And that's why you see us going up by about $6 million overall. But very minor increase. And if you kind of look at our history of our debt over the last 8 years, you can see that we've actually reduced our debt by about $90 million since 2012. You can see we were up $120 million that year, and of course that was the year that the event center bonds were placed. So we are kind of on the lower end of where we've been in the last 8 years, and in fact, if you actually look on a per capita basis, our debt is lower now than it has been in the last 8 years. Now, certainly we're going to be investing in some additional projects and taking on some debt and bonds in order to facilitate that, but we continue to be in a very good position as a community. Our debt ratios are very low relative to many of our counterparts, and due in large part to, I think, just very strong leadership amongst the council and amongst the administration, and making sure that we're being responsible in how we're handling these projects. Last thing I would leave you with, and then I'll answer any questions, and hopefully answer any questions that you might have, is to kind of what we look at going forward, and that those pieces are, you know, we want to take care of what we have, making sure that we're reinvesting in the infrastructure, particularly in the core parts of our city, but we also need to meet the demands of a growing city, and that means building new infrastructure and investing in quality of life. Certainly, a priority is investing in innovation, not just in technology, but we also want to make sure that we're investing in people, in workforce development at the city, that we're investing in creative ideas that help build the bridge and hopefully solve some of the solutions and challenges that we have in our community. We also are trying to make sure that we are maximizing how much we leverage private investments, leveraging public dollars with private dollars to ensure that we're getting investments into our core area of our community. And then managing for risk, understanding where we're at on the economic cycle, and knowing where our reserves are, making sure that we're shoring up our insurance funds. So we've worked to build those balances, and we didn't go through that today, but on our fiduciary side, on our insurance pools, our health insurance pools, to make our work comp pool, to make sure that those maintain financial stability going forward, as well as making sure that we have strong pension systems for those that we continue to maintain for the previous employees and the current employees for the city. And finally, the most important thing we can do as a city is to make sure we maintain and enhance our city's strong financial position, because we support our residents, we support our businesses and chamber in doing so. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Sean. Any questions for Director Pritchard? Go ahead, Counselor.
3 questions. The operating reserve,
Yes.
it's a little bit above the target.
Yes.
Would you recommend just holding that and not doing anything different and using that for some of those years where it might dip a little bit? Is it getting too high above our threshold?
You know, we always continue to assess that, but I think we, again, are cognizant of where we might be a couple years down the road when we're adding that fire station and so forth. We certainly, you know, if you were looking at expenditures, you'd want to make sure they were one-time expenditures rather than long-term encumbrances that would be on the budget for a longer period, because we are trying to manage those future things that are coming along. We also as I said, we need to be cognizant of where we're at on the economic cycle right now, and we are at the end. Clearly, we're going to be on the end of the longest economic cycle, growth cycle that we've had in recent memory. And so we just need to be very careful in that many communities are actually going to the point where they're shoring up their reserves in preparation for that, because many communities, and not so much ours, were caught off guard during the major economic crisis of 2008. So
Sure. Good to have a kitty during an economic contraction. Capital surplus, has there been any discussion about what to do about that? I've already kind of thinking about it. I'd always be looking at, are any bonds callable, and is it worthwhile given interest rates and how much, you know, inflation is and things like that. The public safety facility, we don't have a number on that, but that may be coming forward in the next year or two. That might be a down payment. And then, of course, there's other things like parks and things like that with the Parks Master Plan. And any discussion about this reserve that we have?
there has been some discussions, not anything that's been determined. And so over the next several months, there may be some requests coming to the council in regard to that. But there has been discussions in regard to paying down debt, and we do have some bonds that could be refundable this year. But the one thing we do want to look at is, if we're going to be borrowing for the public safety facility, at what rates would we be borrowing at? Would we be borrowing at higher rates than we were previously? And if so, are we better off to take the cash and put it in toward that project as opposed and borrowing less than paying down old debt that may have been done at lower rates? So that's part of the conversation, but certainly it's a high degree of interest on the part of the administration to see debt pay downs as being part of that.
Absolutely, and I could see holding our fire until we see some of the details on this public safety facility and whether we decide to go forward with it. It might be a nice down payment. Last question, the lodging tax.
Yes.
Is that, it's down quite a bit. Is that organic? Is there really that much less hotel stays, or is there something in the numbers going on that's explaining this?
Well, the one thing I would want to point you to, and if you have your monthly reports in front of you, so I'm going to have you look at page, it's going to be noted as page 3 in your report. So lodging tax is down, and if you looked at it in like a gross, how much was actually received, it's down about 30%, but that is not reflective of what actually has occurred, because we had that major audit adjustment where there was a hotelier who was allocating something as lodging tax when it should have been allocated as entertainment tax, and when the state audited, they found that and determined that there was about a $230,000 change there, and so that had to come to the city as entertainment tax and had to be reclassified as that instead of lodging tax. If you actually controlled for that, we were just slightly up at 0.7%. So it wasn't a great increase, but it was pretty much the same or just slightly ahead of where it had been the prior year, if you controlled for the fact that those shouldn't have been allocated as lodging taxes previously.
Yeah, I figured maybe misallocation. Thanks for the clarification. That was kind of an alarming number on its face, so thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Kiley?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you for the presentation. Just a few comments, and I do have a question in here too. First of all, Councilor Sale and I are pleased to see the sales tax collections and entertainment tax collections are doing well. We were both a little bit concerned, and I am speaking for Councilor Sale right now, really without his permission, but I think maybe I can, even though he shudders to think that I'm doing so. And hopefully that'll continue on. One of your slides was on the 2018 general fund expenditures by department, and it's nice to see that the departments didn't spend all of the money that they actually had allocated to them. So that shows that they're being very prudent with taxpayer dollars. On the other hand, I would say too, it is taxpayer dollars and the taxpayers pay that in for the services. So I guess as much as we can achieve the goals that we establish for ourselves, let's be sure that we are continuing to do that without overspending, obviously. So the general fund, the available fund balance, it's nice to see that up in the 30%. Again, it's been a while, at least since I've been on the council, since it was really first year Councilor Erickson and I were on in 2014, since we were up in this 32% area. And as Councilor Neitzert said, you know, we just need to be careful with how we use the reserves as well, because you never know when the next ice storm is coming. Mother Nature isn't playing nice right now. And the question regarding total outstanding debt, the graph that you showed just a slight uptick in 18 compared to 17. We went up from 304 million to 310 in debt, outstanding debt. What amount approximately do you think will be paid down in the next 2 years as the debt is now?
I don't have that specifically in front of me, but I do know, you know, if we were at about a $25 million pace for this year, it's going to be fairly consistent, I believe, in the next 2 years as well. You probably should see that uptick a little bit.
About a $25 million pace. Okay, very good. And then on the per capita debt, which was your next slide, that's basically leveled off. It was $1,659 per person, and we can expect that because as our population increases, so do our revenues generally, as well as our expenses too, because of the forward outlook that you had here. One of the things, your goals, by the way, are great here, fantastic. Take care of what we have, meet the demands of a growing city, especially take care of what we have. And we do need to be cognizant of our central core area to make sure that we're maintaining and in some cases revitalizing that, as well as meeting the demands of the growing city. But managing risk, investing in innovation, leveraging private investments, I think that's another key area. The more we can have the public-private relationships, the better. So good job, and thank you for an excellent report.
Thank you.
Counselor Starr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Director, one of the questions I wanted to go to, can you pull up our report? Do we have that available? The December monthly?
Have it on here.
That's fine, I can get from there. I guess one of my concerns that I'm seeing in the chart, and it's more probably, are we getting accurate data from the state, or is it because I'm looking at the unaudited numbers that it hasn't been adjusted when the audit numbers come in for those months yet? It just seems like there's some big up and down from one month to the other, where it looks like maybe we've gotten collections in 1 month or didn't get collections in 1 month. I'll get it the right way. The collection was done, the payment wasn't made till the next month. Is that something that you're seeing when we receive those funds from the state, that it's coming at different times, or?
It has, and it's been really variable in terms of, you know, as you said, you know, December was kind of a low month in terms of an increase, and then January we saw a large increase, and I think in November we saw a very high increase in the amount that we were receiving, and then it had been lower the previous month. So it has jumped around, not with any great consistency, so that's why we kind of look at that 12-month smoothing effect.
We look at the rolling number. That makes sense. With one of the things you were talking about, and I missed that part, was the bank income tax. How do we forecast that, or do we don't get a lot of information of where it comes from or how it comes? Do we look at the general industry if they're doing well? Do we just kind of say this is what it's been in the past and use a low number, or do we come back, or how? What's the magic in it, I guess?
You know, I defer to Tom because he's a little bit more of an expert in what we've done with that in the past. But I think we can fairly say we've been very conservative about it because it has been very volatile, going up and down from year to year. As Tom has said, you know, as I've talked to him about it, there's been others that have gotten in a lurch about that. I don't know if there's something you want to say in regard to paying.
Well, yeah, it's just not easy to forecast.
You don't know
'cause-
what the banks are, how profitable they're going to be. And we, the counties receive a portion of it, we receive a portion of it, but it's just from year to year, you just don't know what will affect profitability for the banks, so.
Is there a requirement or strings that come with it when they gave the cities part of that income tax part? All right.
I'm aware of.
I think that covers me for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just to answer kind of one of your questions in regards to the increase in some months than others, the Municipal League at our last board meeting, when we met with the new Secretary of Department of Revenue, and from when I used to work there, there's different kinds of reporting from monthly, which is the vast majority of people. The more money you bring in, the more frequently you report. And so bi-monthly is also another reason why, and then it comes in a little bit later. They're also working through with the Department of Revenue. Some cities are not seeing their payments as timely as they would like to see them come in. And so the Department of Revenue is working on that as well to make sure that the municipalities are, it's the pass-through, getting their collections as quickly as possible, because we rely on that, as well as, our reserve may be able to withstand a few weeks late, but some of these small communities cannot manage on such a small income, and so there's been some issues with that, and so they're working through some of that as well. But you'll see an influx in some months. Some people report bi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, but monthly and bi-monthly are the most two common based on your revenue that you bring in.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I just agree with you. I think that's the pattern we're seeing, it just on a much more dramatic scale than maybe some of the smaller ones. So I'm impressed that the Municipal League's taking a look at it and looking out for us to maybe speed up that process of when they send that money along to us.
And they were very responsive in wanting to make sure that that money is sent right away. And because it kind of jockeys with the reporting as well, when it comes in a different month and you see the numbers are not correctly reflecting that this is the sales tax for this particular month, you can work through it, but it makes it a lot easier if you get it on time.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Director. And if counselors do have questions, feel free to reach out to the department. They're always happy to help answer those questions as you're going through your information. The next item up we have is core institutional growth. We have Director Mike Cooper, as well as Vera McKinnon, President and CEO Dave Fleechek here. Welcome, Director Cooper.
Good afternoon, council members. Mike Cooper, Planning and Development Services. I know that this item has been placed on the agenda today at the request of the council, so I wanted to weigh in as kind of the lead of the conversation today, primarily because of the importance of the topic, but also there have been comments out in the public in recent weeks, months, about the lack of planning in neighborhoods or the core areas. And so as your director of planning, I'm here to hopefully educate all of us that I don't necessarily agree with that perception. So I have about 4 slides today that I want to go through to quickly talk about that. And I want to start out with the big picture of when we look at the core areas of our city, for many, many years, in fact, for decades, as part of our comprehensive planning process, we have included a section of neighborhood conservation areas, probably going on close to 40 years now with our different comprehensive plans. With our most recent SHAPE Sioux Falls comprehensive plan, you can see that those different neighborhoods have been identified, and they're based on a variety of factors or criteria. It could be the age of the housing, it could be the fact that there's historic areas or neighborhood associations, or in many cases because of major institutional facilities that are within different neighborhoods. And the reason that it's important to identify these, because how do we coexist with the neighborhood character and the changes within the institutional needs? So that's kind of the focus of what we're talking about today. And I've included 4 of the major institutions that we've worked with over the years within the core neighborhoods. On the upper left-hand side is Augustana University. The lower left is the University of Sioux Falls. The lower right-hand side is Sanford Health, and then, of course, Vera McKinnon, which is what we're going to focus on today. And without going into a lot of detail, I can just take you around all 4 of these and talk about, over the years, that we have spent many, many meetings, not only with the institutions, but within the surrounding neighborhoods to talk about where their growth is going to occur. So for example, with Augustana University, they have seen a need to expand some of their housing on the east side of Summit Avenue and on the north side of their campus. On the south side of 33rd Street, they've been able to utilize their existing property primarily with their athletic fields. But within their long-range master plan, they're showing that there could potentially be a need to vacate Grange Avenue south of 33rd Street. So again, we've worked with them to identify what direction that they're going to grow in the future. With the University of Sioux Falls, the same way. As they've expanded in recent years, it's been primarily to the east, between 22nd and 26th Street, where they have come in, they've bought homes, they've removed them, they've vacated streets, and they've constructed either parking lots or other campus buildings to expand their programs. They haven't gone south of 26th Street, and they haven't expanded to the west or to the north of 22nd Street. It's been primarily to the east. And that's been by design. It's been by long conversations. And it's hard to see with this vicinity map, but if you're familiar with where Campus Park is, just to the southeast of USF, at one time there was talk about that they would expand over into that Campus Park area in order to accommodate their future athletic facilities. Well, they didn't do that. They decided to go down by 69th and Cliff and buy land for their athletic facilities. But they did expand to the east to provide more space for their campus educational facilities. With Sanford Health, again, a lot of discussion about which direction they are going to expand. And that has been primarily to the north and to the east as well. When they acquired the land to the south, which was part of the Baptist facility, that allowed them to expand south of 18th Street. But on the west side, which is West Avenue, that is the edge that they've held firm without encroaching into that neighborhood. And again, that's been by design. That's been by conversations and policy that we have set up with their campus master planning. So, as we talk about Avera today, just to give you a little historical perspective, and I know the Avera team is here to talk about their impact on the whole city. So I'm just going to focus my comments on the main campus. So on the left-hand side, you can see the outline in yellow of the campus back in 1992 compared to what it is today, the 2017 aerial photo outlined in yellow. And so the southern boundary back in 1992 was pretty much 22nd Street. And now you look recently, the southern boundary is, for the most part, 24th Street. But they haven't expanded across 7th Avenue. And the only expansion that they've done across Cliff Avenue is for their garden spot. And of course, on the north end, they're pretty much landlocked because of the railroads. So the point of showing you this is that over the last 25 years, and actually longer than that, through our conversations with Avera and McKinnon, it has always been, if you're going to grow, because there's going to continue to be a need to expand a central campus for a lot of reasons, the growth should be to the south. It should not be across 7th Avenue. It should not be across Cliff Avenue. It should be to the south. And that's what they've done. So this has been not arbitrary or capricious, but it's been done by design. And I don't have this verified with the Avera folks because just putting this together fairly quickly, but I'm going to throw a few numbers out at you. According to our GIS folks, their research on historical building permits, about 1/3 of the housing structures in the city have been constructed prior to 1970. That's not housing units, but housing structures. So about 1/3 of the existing housing structures are at least 50 years old. And within this area that Avera has expanded over the last 25 years, we're estimating by counting rooftops that that's probably taken out maybe about 150 structures. And again, I haven't verified with their team, but let's just say roughly 150 have been displaced over this last 25 years. Looking at the number of structures citywide over 50 years of age, it's between 16 and 17,000. So this 150 represents less than 1% of the residential structures citywide that are over 50 years of age. And the reason I just say that is because as we talk about these institutions, whether it's the universities or the hospitals or other nonprofits that need to expand, that want to expand in the core neighborhoods, because that's where the infrastructure is. It makes more economic sense to continue to serve those core neighborhoods. They want to be close by those core neighborhoods. And of course, the Avero team will tell you why we've gone beyond just the core main campus for a lot of other reasons. But looking at the housing stock that we lose, because that's always a big subject. So less than 1% of those existing homes that are more than 50 years old. Now, 150 is still a number of homes, and I'm not trying to minimize that for a lot of reasons. But as we look at the future, the next 25 years, the next 50 years of these core institutions, we're putting together a housing core team, a core housing team, through the mayor's office to look at ways going forward that we can be more proactive of working with not only these core institutions, but other nonprofits to expand affordable housing, accessible housing, to add more units within the city, whether they're owner occupied or renter occupied, and also to look at when these units are being displaced, is it even economically feasible to move them? Because honestly, in some cases, it might be more costly to move and rehab a house than to build a new one. And then you're looking at a 50-year-old structure versus a new structure. So the point of me saying this today is that there's a lot more discussion going forward that we want to have with the community, with the council, with these institutions, of looking at how we can continue to support them in our core neighborhoods, because I think that's important for a lot of reasons. But how can we coexist with these neighborhoods, whether it's parking or displacing housing or other concerns that neighbors might have. And so I think we've done a really good job of that in the past, and I think we'll do more of that even forward. And then this is my last slide, which again is the one that we're going to be looking at with you, the Presentation Sisters home, which is on the very southwest corner. So now we're starting to go on the south side of 24th Street. So this yellow line on the right-hand side goes down to 24th Street. And now we're looking at the next phase of growth by design is going south of 24th Street with the Avera with the Presentation Sisters house. So again, my purpose of being part of the conversation today is that we have a long history of planning neighborhoods and working with institutions and with neighborhoods. And we're going to do a lot more of that going forward in the future. So I'll stop there and I'll be around for questions after we have the Avera team going through their presentation. So thank you for letting me talk about this at least one more time.
Stay close, I'm sure we'll have some questions.
I will stay close by. It's all up to you guys.
Thanks for having us. Flash drive. I have about 5 or 10 slides, so I want to go through a few of it. We do see the city of Sioux Falls as a partner, so we want to make sure as you grow, we grow. And we do it in concert with the city's plan. And so I want to kind of tell you our story. Our story of growth is a good one, but how do we continue to grow, maintain the core, maintain our business, and we want to work with the city as we do that. So, and is there a clicker? Awesome. Thank you. So first I'd like to say is, let's see, which one is it? There we go. Thank you. I'd like to start with always our mission. Our mission is really to make a positive impact on the lives and health and persons and communities we serve. And honestly, that's what we're here to talk about today, is that we do see the city of Sioux Falls, our neighborhoods, as our partners, and we want to make a positive impact. So that's just important to who we are and how we function. So something I want to make sure that as we move forward together, we talk about all of that. We always say it's friends and neighbors taking care of friends and neighbors, so that's pretty important. What I want to tell you is a little bit about our growth story. We've been growing along with Sioux Falls. So here is the city of Sioux Falls growth, and you can see it is growing, and you have to understand that we're growing with it. So I'm going to give you a couple stats on just the hospital here at Avera McKenna and the Heart Hospital. Obviously, these are discharges from our institution, and you can see a steady growth of discharges. So we are growing. Obviously, the aging population, change of medicine, this actually bucks a national trend. A lot of the national trend, the discharges are going down because of better medicine, more preventative services, but we have this steady growth of discharges at our institution. This tells a story of how many people are in our institution on any given day. In 2015, we had only 315 people in the hospital. Today, it's 365. We have 50 more patients in our institution every day than we did just a short 4 years ago. So that's a lot of planning, and that's why we're going to talk about Avera on the Wheeze. If you look at, this is just a simple census report that I get. This was back in November. The whole house was full on the adult side. Everyone's full. And if you look at the top there, we had 13 surgicals to place that day. So not only were we full, we also had to figure out how are we going to get people discharged and 13 more patients in. So that was in November of this last year. This was just February. We were full in February and we're on high census alert. So we really do have a critical need for beds as the community keeps growing and as the medicine keeps specializing. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We've actually had to divert over 1,000 patients in 2018 that we couldn't accept because we were full. And so you can see it steadily has increased. So this whole growth for our health system is important. We don't want to turn anyone away, but it's just something that we need to plan for with future facilities. This is my recruitment plan. We recruit by physician. We have a total of between 38, 47, 33 new physicians that we hire every year into this community. And that's significant to the growth of this community. Usually they have 3 or 4 staff members with them, so it's a constant on the search for physicians. We also plan by specialty on the left-hand side. You can see there, to match the growing community, we got to make sure we have enough OBGYN doctors, nephrologists, making sure we meet the community need. So there's a constant planning internally, but also with the city on what that means for space. This little infographic, I think, is a good one here. If you look at the lower left-hand side, you can see clearly the city of Sioux Falls is growing. Rural practices are hard to find physicians. The subspecialization of medicine. What's happening here is at Avera McKinnon, I have a breast surgeon, a colorectal surgeon, a bariatric surgeon, and a thyroid surgeon. Patients from Mitchell, Worthington, Brookings are coming to Sioux Falls to get those specialized services now. So I not only have a growth of a population, I have an increase of medical subspecialty where patients want to travel and see. And so I'd give you another example. We just hired our neurointerventionalist. They go in and they vacuum clots out of the brain for strokes. I've hired one. He's in Pennsylvania as we speak. He just showed us pictures of a 48-year-old mother with 3 kids with the aneurysm in the brain that he actually went in and was able to take the clot out, and the mother was able to walk out of the hospital with 0 symptoms of a stroke. That's taking care of your friends and neighbors, quite frankly. That's the medical subspecialization that we have to add into our community to stay up. We have 2 great health systems, and that's the kind of technology that we need. But the upper hand corner there is important. The 56% of our patients come from outside Sioux Falls. I can tell you in Gregory, they really do not like our parking ramps. They do not like our 6 buildings on our campus. And so we have had a strategy working with the city to really decompress our campus. And I'll show you a couple examples of that. But we really want more people off our campus than on our campus, and we're going to talk about that. Here's our current bed count. With Avera on Louise, we're going to go from 470 beds to 515, so that's a good thing. That's in the core. And plus it includes now Avera on Louise. There's a line item there for 24 beds, so that's a good thing for us. We also created our inpatient rehab unit. That's on the 5th floor of the cancer center. And so we had to, that was a shelled space that we put in, so that's helpful. And then our new ICU just opened up this week. We actually transferred patients on Monday and everything went good, knock on wood. But it's a beautiful new facility where we have 8 new beds. Again, that's on our core campus. The reality is though, we have multiple campuses. We are, and I got to tell you, it's expensive to move out on Avera on Louise. I can't share housekeeping, can't share dietary, can't share pharmacy, but we've made a concerted effort to make sure that we keep within our growth on the core area, but also we've expanded out into the rural areas as well. So we have Avera on Louise, the heart hospital was an example years ago, behavioral health was an example years ago. The 28th in Marion is a freestanding ER there. That's in the neighborhood. It's away from our core facility. 69th in Cliff, 69th in Western, and we have some new centers coming that will be announced shortly. So you can see we've had a history here of moving outside of just the yellow lines, and we've been working with the city. How we do that is we have geographical regions that we kind of look for, and where do we want to place our facilities. And so it isn't just all around Avera McKinnon, it really is around how do we get around town to have our access points. So something we wanted you to know about. Avera on Louise is coming very well. This is a 24-bed hospital, soon to be a 48-bed hospital. We have 1 floor that is unfinished. Clinic on the right, hospital on the left. And I do see that we could expand on this facility now that we now have dietary and pharmacy and ancillary services. So I could see this acreage getting bigger over time as opposed to our main hospital. Again, people from Gregory, South Dakota like to drive up to this versus trying to get to my campus. It's very, very complicated for them getting on our campus. But we need our campus too, so we need to keep that updated as well. Our Addiction Care Center is also on Avera on Louise. It's to the east of there. That's also going to have a neighborhood feel. It's going to be more residential in nature as opposed to institutional. And then our Human Performance Center also is going to be on the south side of Avera-on-Louise as well. And so all this has been in partnership with the city, knowing where we want to add our family health centers. I throw this slide up because our community is changing, and it also, this is the school system here, chamber, I think it was city council update. Clearly a diversified workforce is what we need to do, which ties into my workforce. Here's my any given time, all the openings that I have. I have to attract and retain people, and what's that take? Nurses are my biggest professional services that I need to hire. So we have created the Avera Academy that was recently announced. We are teaching English to our new American housekeepers, so they're getting a fresh look at English. Just a basic meal for our employees, but also housing. I could see the houses on the south side of our campus that we provide housing support for our workforce. I could see new nurses who are full of debt coming out, and they sign with us, they'd get a year of low rent housing that we could actually support right next to our campus. So there's another opportunity for those houses. Instead of being rented out, we could use them as our own workforce, because I need workforce. I'm desperate for workforce. So as I close, I just want to say the city of Sioux Falls and Avera, we're good partners together. I think the Walsh Family Village is another residential that's on that property, and the sisters will be straight to the south of there as well. So I want to thank you. That was really quick going through it, but I'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions? Councilor Staley.
Director Cooper, please. I have a request, first of all. If those maps that we had at the very beginning, Tony, if you could bring that back, could I get a copy of those? That was very interesting about Sanford. I can't read it.
Yes.
And Councilor Starr says he can't either. So
Get you larger versions of
yeah,
each
I'd
one.
like to see that, to have that in my hand. And when we go back to that, which we're not getting back over there, but you had the Avera in blue, and you had them going as they are in that parameter from Cliff over to 7th, and then you had them sweeping down over to Phillips Avenue, past Phillips. That blue area went way past over to Phillips. And it all said, Avera. I wish we could get back there.
That was Sanford.
No, it says Avera. It was right, nope, if we
Okay.
could.
We'll see if we can get
It was
back up here.
it was like the first slide that you showed us.
Okay. Oh, of the neighborhood conservation areas.
Yes.
Okay.
And you had
Yes.
it in blue, and you had it designated, you had Avera on it.
So those were not designed to match up with the campus boundaries, but it was just more of a generic name to give to a neighborhood area. That's why it doesn't match the boundaries. Yep.
Yeah, right there,
Yes.
because that is going down
So
over to,
that's why it's not intended to be,
because you have McKinnon Hospital labeled on it.
yeah,
there.
it's not intended to show the future growth area of each institution, but it's just more of a, giving those areas a name for identity purposes, if that helps you explain it. So these were not intended to be boundaries or edges of the growth of the campuses.
Okay.
So
And-
that- sorry
And
for
then
the
I had
confusion.
asked Tom Bosch yesterday, and I had mentioned it to your department as well, that I did want to know how many homes have been removed from that area in the last 30 years. Now, you mentioned 25, and you were very careful to say you're not sure of the number.
That was just
And
a rough estimate.
Yeah, I would, well, and actually, if we had that map blown up a little bit, I like that. You could kind of count those rooftops.
We
And
covered
I-
about 150, we were estimating, between 22nd and 24th Streets
that are
over the
gone.
last 25 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? See, Councilor Brecky, go ahead.
Not a question, but a comment, since I was the one who asked that Avera come and present this. I'd had a really nice, long conversation with Tom, and I appreciate your coming and doing this, because my concern was, and Mike said it several times, and I don't, this isn't critical, but what it did when I talked to Tom for as long as I did was it was encouraging to me that we are discussing issues like, how, like what services actually need to be on the campus and what services don't need to be on the campus. Are we discussing things like how tall, maybe we should build taller buildings, on the campus? Those kinds of issues because, and Mike, you said it several times, we've always been focused on helping our institutions grow. And I'm not suggesting we change that, but we do need to change a little bit what that looks like. And we do need to start thinking about, again, we used to call it urban renewal in the 90s. We thought this was a great thing. But now we do have kind of a coexisting issue that we need to deal with because we don't want to ruin the beautiful neighborhoods we've created and you guys are an essential part of. And so I thank you for coming here and explaining it to the full council because I asked Tom a lot of these questions and it gave me a great deal of comfort to see that those kinds of questions are being asked. And as a council, I think those are my concerns on a go-forward basis, trying to achieve that balance. I don't want to do anything to disrupt the services, but I also, at the rate of, just in the 9 months I've been here, or 10 months I've been here, I've seen 25 houses go. Just in 9 months, just did kind of a mental count of these vacations as we're going through and we're ticking them up. And I'm just going, at some point, we have to have some dialogue about that, with our institutions, with each other, with the city. So I thank you for coming and I appreciate the information that you shared with us today. And Mike, I appreciate that you being here. I know you went over that at one of the council committees, but I was concerned even that day that the full council had not had that information. And so I appreciate your coming forward because I was thinking that would be helpful as well.
Go ahead, Councilor Neitzer.
Just as a matter of just a little commentary, this accessible housing and losing housing is a huge concern. It's obviously the plans have been well thought out by the city and by Avera, and that's very encouraging. I guess I just would want to point out that there are two sides to the coin. We struggle with this, and we've been talking a lot about accessible housing, but there's competing interests in everything. So if we get to be so inhospitable that we're pushing our institutions out to the fringes, we're going to have new development, which is incredibly expensive. We'll have sprawl. There'll be all kinds of issues. So there is a balance here. These are core institutions. They've been here for decades. They provide thousands of jobs, tons of economic impact. They're an anchor to the neighborhoods. They're an asset. And so we have to be really careful not to get into what can be in vogue sometime, which is just to bash the large institution and call them evil developers or whatever rhetoric we may use. So we do have to find a balance, but we do have to remember there is two sides to the coin, and I hope we do that. And as far as development out in one of the biggest problems with developing affordable housing is land prices are through the roof. We got to figure out how to get land prices down. If a lot costs you $70,000, there's no way you can build a $100,000 house on it. You just can't. It's going to have to be about $300,000. So, and I'm not sure how we do that, but we got to figure out how to get land prices down. That's the first place to start.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments? Councilor Kiley?
Thank you. I'd just like to thank Mr. Felicek and Mr. Bosch for coming in. It is very obvious that you are in concert with the city plans, and I thank you for working with our planning staff. And I would say that you are meeting your mission of making a positive impact on the lives and the health of our community. I, for one, have benefited from your services. My family have benefited from our services, from your services, and as well as countless thousands others in our community and outside too. So thank you very much for the information. Great presentation.
Councilor Staley.
And let me say that I don't know that I haven't called you evil developers, and I don't think anyone in our town has called you evil developers. The issue at hand that we're going to be voting on tonight has nothing to do with the medical quality of care that you provide. It is having to do with the presentation nuns building a facility for their nuns to live in and then possibly having some other purpose moving down the road. So it's a good discussion to have because I don't think the people in that neighborhood were aware that Avera owns a lot of those homes. People don't know what the plan is for that. And people living on that west side of 7th Avenue have a right to know. I mean, this is our community. So it's nothing personally, and we certainly don't want to keep you from bringing new doctors in, but I don't think this discussion about these houses over here really has anything to do with bringing in new doctors. I'm going to have a little presentation tonight that I'm going to do, but one of the things I'm giving you is a thumbs up, because you have taken your expansion and you have taken it to areas of town that are open for expansion. And that's really maybe the conversation we're going to need to have is, or maybe the conversation is that you're going to take all those homes and we're going to level the rest of the homes from 23rd over to 26th, and that's just going to be total a big parking lot, or it's going to be, you're going to have another ER expansion or whatever. We don't know. Tom, you just indicated, or one of you said, I think you said you're going to let people stay in those homes. Great, but I'm going to be showing some pictures of the homes tonight. They're lovely homes. They're not junky homes. They're not trashy rentals. People raise their families in these homes, and they're homes that will never be replaced. Bravo to Avera for trying several years ago to create a housing development north of the penitentiary. I don't think you're currently moving any more homes out there, but my understanding is that was so cost prohibitive because of the regulations the city has in place that it really wasn't worth the price. So maybe we need to move the homes to some little town that can enjoy them, like Lenox. I think that's where the Elmwood people moved their homes to. But it's a big discussion to have. And Sanford they're not here at the table right now, but I also want to know, what's their plan? Are we taking a corridor from Minnesota, and are we opening up that whole street from 18th over to 22nd, taking all those homes out and letting them have a big passageway to their hospital? A conversation to have, because I know people who live along that way, and they aren't aware that this is going to be happening. So I just think more and more we need to be involving all of our citizens in this conversation. And we certainly want good medical care. You're doing it. That's great. But there's a lot of people involved in this discussion, in my opinion. So thank you for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you again for both Mike and Dave and Tom. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to our next presentation as we are up against a time crunch. We've got 2 more presentations and also a fiscal committee to follow. So the next item is the 2019 Sculpture Walk program. Jim Clark, welcome. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Jim Clark, Sculpture Walk. Good to be here, my 16th time introducing the upcoming sculptures. Through 2018, we've had 777 sculptures go through Sculpture Walk downtown. We sold 195, 13 this year, very happy with that. 2018, good year. We've also leased every year 17 to 20 sculptures around the community. 2018 was a very good year for us, and we're working hard to make 2019 even better. I'm going to compress my presentation from 15 minutes to 10, so I'm going to go through all of these 59 sculptures and Sculpture Walks, and even faster through the alternates. So let's see if I can get this right. There we go. We're going to start at the pavilion. Our first sculpture is Coach Rich Greeno. Some of you knew Coach Greeno, legendary coach at Lincoln High School, and that's going to be in the Visitors Center at the Washington Pavilion, a new site for us. The next one is Surround, and on these slides you'll see the photos of the sculptures or the images that the artists sent us in their entries back last summer, and so that's what you're seeing. You'll see some actual photos and some images, some sketches, and then also the artist's name and the size of the sculptures and the material. De-Accelerator, Stephen Mack is from Florida. Nice size sculpture. Breaker Fall is Kristen Nethus. She's from Wisconsin. We have a lot of different materials this year, from bronze to steel to marble to granite to wood. High Five, Christine Knapp is from Colorado. We had 137 entries, 16 states represented in Canada. Eric Thorson is from the Flathead Lake area in Montana. Many of these sculptures have been with us for many years. Local perspective from Jason Richter, new artist from Sioux Falls. 7 artists from Sioux Falls, 10 from South Dakota. Food Chain, Jerry Nelson, new artist from Iowa. I think he's a dentist, so it fits him pretty well. Reeds from Bobby Carlisle. She's from Colorado, been with us for many years, great artist. Flute player, Osamide Obazi, originally from Nigeria, lives in California now. Prairie Vane, Dan Perry is a professor at the University of Northern Iowa. Large sculpture. Silver Bell, Heather Wall is from Powell River, Canada, about as far west as you can get in Canada. Wind Caller from Wendy Myrie. She's a new artist from Sioux Falls, works at the Bronze Age Art Casting Foundry on North Weber Avenue. An Angel in Contemplation, Ben Hammond. He is from Utah, and he does NFL Hall of Fame player busts every year. That's how good he is. Confluence, Ken Newman is from Idaho. He's nationally known, does spectacular work. Resplendent Ardor, this is a big dancer. Greg Mendez has been with us for many years. He's from Indiana. Leviathan Daniel Klock is from British Columbia, Canada. Stalking Fox, David Turner is from Virginia. Clownin, Patty Stakar, great artist from Colorado. Journey, new artist, Zach Schnock. I think he's from Iowa, if I remember right. Corey Moons, Sean Morin. He has about 8 different granites in this sculpture. Tom's Point, Henry Royer, worked on Wall Street for many years, lived in Manhattan, and then followed his passion of sculpting, lives in Wisconsin now. Watchman, David Skoras, a professor at Western Connecticut University. Dan Perry's second sculpture. Spectrum, Jeff Satters from Sioux Falls. His first sculptures were last year. He had 2, sold both of them, sold other sculptures. He's just been very successful and lives in Sioux Falls. Food Chain Eagle, another Sioux Falls artist, Bob Tenkate. Fanflare, a new artist, Hale and Katz from Minnesota. Cube Farmer, Craig Snyder's from Plymouth, Minnesota. Perry Aberest, D. Borms from Sioux Falls. Common Thread, Fred Klingenhofer, new artist from Chicago. Clark Martinix from Mitchell. He does ironwork. 3.1, Alex Mendez. He has 2 sculptures in Sculpture Walk. He's from Indiana. His brother's Greg. Kit Fox, Pokey Park. She wanted us to show last year with Red-Legged Frog. She's from Arizona. Vita LeBear, Cedar Muller is also from British Columbia, Canada. Protection, Jade Wendell, marble piece. He's from Colorado. Balance of Life, Lyle Parks is from Sioux Falls. That's one sculpture. Lithic Bird, Nathan Johansson is from Utah. It's bronze, it looks like marble, but it's bronze. Bighorn Sheep, Travis Sorensen is from Belfouche. And he has the horse that's in front of Coffea, excuse me, used to be Claudia's, Coffea at 10th and Phillips. Space Cat, Anthony Guntrans from Colorado. Reaching the Light, Kimber Fieber is from Minneapolis. Gotcha, Charles Jost has 2 sculptures, and he's a new artist from Chicago. Dendron, Alex Mendez, his second piece. This will stand in front of Washington Square across from the pavilion. Under construction, Gary Hovey. He does knives, forks, and spoon sculptures He also has Parkinson's disease. Does a tremendous job with his sculptures. Actually, his sculpture this year, Barely Standing, was People's Choice. The bear in front of Shriver's. Next year, it'll stand in the city center garden on the north side of the building. River People, Tim Adams is from Webster City, Iowa. Bobby Carlisle's second piece, Mystic Forest. To Meet the Storm, Bob Brubaker's from Arizona. So we have some whimsical, some figurative, some modern, abstract, good variety. Charles Yost, his second sculpture, it's the one on the right. Bird Watchers, this one now is standing in front of Nyberg's Ace Hardware. It's on lease, but it will be in Sculpture Walk in 19. Greg is from Georgia. Outer Limits, Tim James and Aidan Damaris. They're artists. They actually teach high school in Minnesota, and they work together on their sculptures. Harold Link Spiral Dance, we have one similar to that front of Minerva's right now that was broken, repaired, and we put it back up. But this one's bigger. This is 12 feet high, so this will have a pretty nice presence downtown. Harold is from Colorado. It's Just Lunch, John Hughes from Minnesota. Dialogue, Serge Majneski, originally from the Ukraine, lives in Vancouver, British Columbia now. Gem, Jeff Satter's second sculpture. Blue Heron, Travis Sorensen's second sculpture. Actually, the wrong title. This is Violin Player by Yosemite. This is his second sculpture. Ancient Monolith, Sue Quinlan from Colorado. All the World, Lee Looning and Sherry Treby. This will be a popular sculpture. They're from Sioux Falls. Keep Your Balance, Ray Kobold. He is from Chicago. Virgil, Ted Sitting Crow Garner is from Chicago. And the alternates, I'll go through these really quickly. Three Cubs and a Tree, Eric Thorson. Yosemite, Tim James and Aidan Damaris. Lithic Bird 1, Nathan Johansson. Harlequin, David Scora. Refall, Patty Stakars. Sunnyside Sea, Sung Hee Min. Incandescence, Clark Martinick. We go to alternates if any one of the top 59 fall out for whatever reason. Circle of Life, Lyle Park, Sisters, Tim Adams. Three Curves, Redix, Alex Mendez. Zodiac Totem 5, Pokey Park. And Drifter, Eric Thorson. Datapug Predicament, Nathan Johansson. Glow from Within, Tim Adams. And that's Sculpture Walk 2019. We're very excited about it.
Thank you so much. Any comments, questions? Councilor Starr.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Clark, how do we get all of the sculptures that we need to fill our show? Do you solicit anyone, or how do you say, hey, we'd really entertain taking a look at your work, or are there people on your wish list that
we do all that. Good question. I send out, I have about 600 artists in my database, so I send out the call to our program directly. And then once in a while, we'll advertise on different websites for them. We had 137 entries this year, which is about average. But after we get the ARC installed, we're going to focus on growing our artist database. And every year we get 10 to 16 new artists, which is important. And over the years, though, the artists, we've been at it now for 15 years, going on 16, and our artists have aged. And a lot of them live a long ways away, and if they don't sell a sculpture, lease a sculpture, win awards, then over time they stop coming back. So we need to continue to recruit. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Makes sense. I think if I can follow up just a little bit, I think it's the sincerest form of flattery when other people copy ideas and things, but I think we're seeing more and more communities add sculpture type walks or similar type programs. So, and I think that's a testament to the great job that you've done over the years of putting this in place. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other statements, comments, questions? Go ahead, Councilor Staley.
When, I was just wondering, how, when they get here, how do they transport them? Is trucks?
Well,
Or?
trucks, trailers, some ship out to Parker Transfer, and then we have to uncrate them and take them downtown. And then most of the artists, if they don't transport their sculptures, they fly to Sioux Falls for our events on the weekend.
Because some of them are probably pretty heavy, aren't they?
A lot of them are very heavy. Yeah, we use forklifts, start at 5 o'clock in the morning when we install.
Wow.
We have 3 teams that do the installations. Yeah, we're usually done in 3 hours with all of them. But yeah, it's like I said, we've had 777 go through downtown. So, and a lot of these are pretty heavy.
777 sculptures coming?
Have gone through downtown already.
Wow.
In the 15 years. So with this incoming batch, we'll be at 836.
Go ahead, Councilor Brecky.
Just take a minute to reflect back on the 16 years, how it's grown, and you've been a part of it the whole time. Just, if you could, just, you know.
Yeah, well, in the beginning, we didn't know what was going to happen at all. So then it just grew, and we're really so busy that, we don't want to ever become complacent. We're always looking at improving the program, knowing that we're going to have competition. That's just part of the business of doing Sculpture Walk, as people travel through Sioux Falls, and they said, well, we love this program. We think we can do it in our community, and I get calls all the time about it. Last one was Corpus Christi, Texas, and Lafayette, Louisiana, and so, but it's it's really hard work. It's very challenging, and there's 1,000 pieces to the puzzle, and we have good people working with us.
I do remember the first budget was $200,000. I don't know what it's grown to, but I do remember that was what the council was trying to eke out for this good idea.
I was wondering if you were city attorney at that time when we started, right? Yeah. I've aged a bit since
Kudos to Casey Marshall and Tam Baker. That was, I know Tam
they
especially,
helped.
but they were 2 of the council members at least that
Darren Smith and Dee Knudsen helped.
decided we should have some art.
Right.
Great.
It's a community effort.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll have you on our agenda this evening, so if you have additional questions, you can certainly ask him as well then. Our last item is the Overlook Cafe Management Agreement. Welcome Jackie Nelson from Parks and Rec.
Good afternoon. Jackie Nelson, Administrative Manager, Sioux Falls Parks and Recreation. Excited to talk to you today about our proposed new management agreement for the Falls Overlook Cafe. So to give you some quick history, the Falls Cafe opened in 2005. Since that time, the cafe has had 4 different operators, with the last RFP being issued in 2013. In October of this past year, the Parks and Recreation Department was notified that the current operator would not be returning, leading to the agreement expiring at the end of January of 19. That being said, a new RFP process was implemented and put in place this past November. In reviewing the timeline on the slide, the RFP was posted on November 16th with proposals due no later than December 20th. After review, the intent to award the bid to Stensland's Enterprises was posted on January 14th. On February 20th, the Parks and Recreation Board unanimously approved the proposed management agreement, and with that, with Stensland's leading us here today. So a little bit about Stensland's. Stensland's Enterprise is a family-owned and operated business with a farm-to-table philosophy. They're known for their organic crop farming for over 25 years. They're an established business with one other location here in Sioux Falls next to Olive Garden, as well as one location in Larchwood, Iowa. They also partner with local companies to provide local products. As it relates to the proposed agreement, As it relates to the proposed agreement, you'll find many components that mirror the previous agreement that recently expired. Some key terms include no management fee, a 5-year agreement with an option to extend, 10% of the gross receipts paid to the City of Sioux Falls, and the exclusive right for Stensland's to rent the cafe for events such as graduations, wedding, business meeting, so on and so forth. This agreement would also allow for Stensland's to market the cafe as the Falls Overlook Cafe by Stensland. Proposed hours of operations are expanded from what the current operator had been providing. So as you can see, May through September, Monday through Sunday would be 11 to 8. October through January 6th would be Monday through Thursday, 11 to 2, Friday to Sunday, 11 to 8, and January 7th through April closed but open for special events. Their menu that's being proposed would be ice cream, of course, 50 flavors rotating, hot and cold sandwiches, salad, pizza, hot and cold beverages, a catering menu, as well as market items that they would be able to sell in the cafe. As relates to key responsibilities within the agreement, again, very consistent and similar to what the previous operator had. Stensland's would set the hours of operation for the cafe with director approval. They would employ, supervise, and direct employees for the successful delivery of food and services, provide insurance, as well as daily maintenance and janitorial services, and then maintain all licenses and permits necessary for the manager to manage and operate the cafe within Falls Park. City key responsibilities would include ground maintenance, exterior building maintenance and repairs, snow removal, maintenance and payment of utilities, as well as, subject to funding, provide repairs in excess of $250. This is consistent again with the previous contract that we've had in place. So in conclusion, to round out the timeline from where I started, we are now to our informational, and with that I thank you for letting me present today, and I look forward to presenting to you next Tuesday night at the City Council meeting for formal action. I would like to say I do have Eric with me from Stensland's. He will be the general manager at the new cafe if approved, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jackie. Appreciate it. Council questions, statements, comments? Go ahead, Councilor Seeley.
I just have a statement that I think serving ice cream at the Falls is a great idea. I can't think of a better thing to bring people in, and they can, they're going to be able to take like an ice cream cone out and walk around with it, right?
They will, yep.
But not a drink.
They could take drinks, plastic cups.
No, I'm saying like we don't allow people, though, I'm just comparing this to walking around with a glass of wine, right? We don't let people walk around with a beer in their hand, but they can walk around with an ice cream cone in their hand. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Starr?
Yes, thank you. My quick question, when I perused through the contract quickly, one of the things that stood out to me was that we would only collect one annual payment, if I read that correctly. How does that fit in with the overall concept of what we do with other facilities and things? Or what was the reasoning for that?
Yeah, so that's just consistent with the current RFP that's been in place since 2013 and prior to that with the current operators. So we've always had one annual payment January 30th of the following year. So it's just keeping the contract consistent with where it's been in the past.
But monthly reporting?
Monthly reporting, absolutely.
Okay. It just seems like we're creating an annual payable that doesn't end up getting paid till the end of the year. Just as a business person, that concerns me that we would do that, and because we've done it in the past, this might be a time to possibly fix that rather than creating that much of a payment. It's where we've gotten in trouble in other departments with businesses that do business with the city, that we've allowed them to run up too large of a tab, because hopefully this is a nice sum of money by the time we're done. So.
Oh, absolutely.
It's my input.
Any other questions? Thank you for being here, Eric. We appreciate your investment in the city. Thank you, Jackie, for your presentation. we look forward to the next first reading next week. That concludes our informational meeting. We will turn it over to public comment. Is there any public comment on any of the items that were presented today? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn. Before we do that, I want to let you know we will start the fiscal committee in approximately 10 minutes. So 10 minutes if you're on the fiscal committee, as well as all of council is welcome to stay and be a part of the conversation presentation. It is also recorded out there, so if you are a counselor that is not on the committee and needs to leave, you can certainly watch that back so you can be a part of that conversation. Again, the meeting will start in 10 minutes. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.